There's a problem, or perhaps byproduct, with modern phones receiving 6, 7, 8 years of software updates, and one company sort of had it figured out years ago. If companies can iron out this issue, there's a great possibility that we could see the average smartphone upgrade take far longer, saving people money and helping out the environment. This is the unexpected problem with long-term software support. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas, and I'm sure that, like me, you're glad that Android phone makers are taking this long-term support seriously and delivering not only security patches but major version upgrades to phones to take them into the next decade. Why is this even relevant? Well, because in many cases, not running at least the last version of Android can result in some compatibility issues where some apps won't run or even download from the Play Store in some more extreme cases. Software that requires particular security tends to be quite picky, so stuff like banking apps, password managers. Having the latest software on your phone makes the whole user experience just, well, that much more smooth and seamless. About 5 years ago, you'd be lucky if your top of the range brand new Android phone received 3 major upgrades. And to be fair, that's about the same length as the average American's phone contract. A lot of the time it has to do with the contract length and when people are eligible for a free upgrade through their carrier. Not only does this entice people to get the latest smartphone, but it also helps the carriers because you're then locked into another 24 or 36 month contract. Big brain moves by the carriers. But as the economies have changed and the general landscape has evolved, including the tech inside smartphones themselves, it makes sense to hold on to your phone for longer. And it's almost been an arms race between Google and Samsung to give their phones as much long-term support as possible. If anything, as a positive PR or a reason to buy them every year because, well, they always have your back with the software updates, kind of thing. It's all psychology. Many of you probably would have guessed this, but the company to have done this the best over the years is of course Apple. You can buy a second-hand iPhone XS or XR and still have the latest software on there. Those are coming up for 7 years old, which is pretty crazy. And it works. I mean, I see so many people walking around with second-hand iPhones or used iPhones from a few years ago, perhaps because they cost a fortune in the first place and so people are less likely to want to upgrade them yearly. But I also think that people were quite content with, say, their 12 Pro or last gen SE because the software is up to date and it generally does the job, even if we know that the hardware isn't exactly groundbreaking. But one of the reasons Apple has actually been so successful is the hardware. You might not think the iPhone 16e is a good deal because honestly it lacks a lot of the hardware that you find in even a good mid-ranger these days, but it packs a monster system on chip, which is likely to keep the phone feeling relatively fresh for 5+ years with no bother. One of the reasons why iPhones make good long-term or even second-hand, third-hand phones, and have done for so many years, is that they're always pretty high-end, if not cutting-edge, from a performance perspective right from the get-go, and so they hold on to their speed for longer before really showing any signs of slowing down. And even then, there's not usually a major drop-off, it tends to be quite gradual. Maybe the 5+ year mark you start to realise, yeah, maybe I do need an upgrade. Compare that to Google, seemingly Android's frontrunner for long-term software support, and the case of the Pixel 6, which is due software upgrades until next year. That's 5 major upgrades, and the performance at least, well, it's just not going to be there for all that many people. It's all well and good offering software updates for 7 years, but what happens if the hardware can't keep up with the software? As I spoke about recently in my Pixel 9 Pro XL coverage, this doesn't just pertain to sort of the system on a chip, the processor, the RAM in these phones, but also stuff like storage type. Google has been using UFS 3.1 in its highest end Pixel 9 Pro XL, where UFS 4 has kind of been the standard in flagships, the same price as these Pixel 9 Pro XLs, for sort of the past 2 years now. This stuff makes a tangible and very noticeable difference when you hold on to your phone beyond the 24 or 36 month contract cycle. Though I'm sure this is less of a concern for those looking for a cheap used phone. Stuff like screen refresh rate, brightness, camera hardware, battery technology will also play a factor in how an old phone feels. Combine a few of these and it doesn't matter if the phone's running the hottest, latest version of Android, it's not going to feel any better to use than a phone that might be a few Android phones out of date but is actually there on a hardware level. Of course, another major factor that plays into this is battery health, and those of you who have ever tried to use a phone with like a sub 80% battery health will know exactly what I'm talking about. Being afraid of using the phone on higher brightness in fear the battery is just going to drop to 0%, or stuff like performance. It takes a real hit when it senses the battery is at a low health. Below a certain point, the performance can drop drastically, 20, 30, 50%. There's also the elephant in the room. This video that I made 5 months ago, the Android versions really don't matter anymore. Back when we were begging phone makers for 4 or 5 years of versions, the difference between those versions was almost chasmic, even individually, for certain versions of manufacturers. And these days you'd be hard pressed to really tell the difference between Android 14 and Android 15 unless you were a serious fanatic and play around with all the little bugs and features and individual things. Those things that maybe the general public don't even know exist on their phone, let alone know how to use them. And there will still be software features that are locked to certain makes and models for a certain amount of time, if not indefinitely in some cases. I mean, AdMe and Audio Eraser have been on specific Google Pixels, so even if your Google Pixel is running the latest version of Android, it might not have those features that other Google Pixels running the latest version of Android have. Once again muddying the waters when it comes to what you should expect your brand new Android phone to have in 2025. There isn't an inherent issue with software update support, but it isn't the only piece of the puzzle, and I really think that's worth noting, that whilst it's great that these companies are offering platform upgrades for many years to come, the hardware also needs to be considered at the same time in order for you to have the best experience with an older phone. Thank you to these companies for making these phones viable for longer, even if the hardware might not be there right now. I don't want this video to sound like I hate the fact that we're getting long-term software support. Those of you who've watched my videos for years will know I absolutely love it. I just want to make people aware. You need to pick your long-term smartphones wisely, because whilst hardware might not be everything right now, it plays a massive part in the viability of a smartphone going forward. Combine this with excellent software access and you've got a phone set for half a decade or more to come. Guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think of this long-term software support, and what do you think of long-term hardware in the comments? Do you have a Pixel 6 and you've been holding on to it for ages and you're still fine with the performance? We'd love to hear about that. What's your use case? I know we love to celebrate these smartphones getting long-term software support, and generally for the consumer that is, particularly on the second-hand market, a really good thing, but I do think we need to be cognizant of the other aspects that come into it. I'm a massive proponent of holding onto your tech for longer, not just upgrading when you think there's a new shiny thing out there, because that is quite wasteful. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and while you're down in the comments, be sure to hit like if you enjoyed today's content and subscribe to never miss another upload. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been Ryan Thomas, and I will catch you later. Cheers.